certain Elon Musk is getting all the attention because he's inserted himself in Mar-a-Lago and is constantly at Trump's side. But the guy who, behind the scenes, for many months, if not years, has been preparing for the next Trump cabinet and administration to be strongly MAGA.
Now, David, you've got this huge splash on the front of today's paper. Tell me a little bit more about what Trump's team have been saying about tariffs.
Well, this fundamentally goes into what Donald Trump was saying on the campaign trail, that he not only did he want to hit China with very big tariffs, that's another matter that's a long-running matter with China of 60%, but he has been talking about general universal border taxes for all imports into America of at least 10 and up to 20%. This is designed to rebalance the trade deficit that America has with a lot of places, but of course Britain would get caught up in it if it was a truly universal tariff, and that would be devastating for a lot of British exporters. Things like whiskey, the whiskey industry comes to mind. They've been through something like this before in a minor trade war with America. So what we wanted to try and find out was, is this just bluster? Is this Trump using the threat of tariffs to try and get those trade partners that he's angry with to accept more American imports? Or what's really going on here? And I spoke to Stephen Moore, who is a close economic advisor to Trump and has been for the last few years. He was the guy who was put up by Trump for the Federal Reserve board in 2019, but he didn't make it. He didn't get through the confirmation process, but he's remained a close advisor. And he says he's a free trader. I know this because I've spoken to him before. He doesn't, or at least didn't before, really agree with tariffs. But he says he's persuaded by Trump's argument, and he thinks that Trump is onto something, because what the end goal is for America is to stimulate the domestic manufacturing that has seen lots of factories and production drift away to low-wage economies like Mexico, which has a big trade surplus with America in goods, and like China, and like the European Union, actually, which it's not so much the low wage; it's the stuff that Europe makes and sells is in great demand in America, and it has a surplus. Britain doesn't in goods. We sell less to America than we import. That's not true of services. We have like our financial services, etc. We have a surplus, but I've got the impression from Stephen Moore that Trump is not talking about putting tariffs on services so much as goods, because he wants that tangible effect that grows blue-collar jobs in America. That's what it's all about. And I got the impression from him that it's not just campaign rhetoric, that Trump is pretty determined to do this. And another reason he wants to do it is because he wants to make big tax cuts to meet his campaign promises, and he can present tariffs even if they raise prices in America because they put up the cost of goods, foreign imported goods, that he can present it as saying, look, I've done something here with tariffs to bring in a lot of money. I'm going to use that money to put more dollars back in your pocket. It's up to you what you spend your dollars on. So it's a sort of free. In that sense, he sees it as a free trade move, which is kind of it's a weird way of thinking from the British perspective, which has always seen tariffs as punitive and a hindrance to trade. Well, Trump sees them as a necessary corrective so that he can grow American production.
So, David, is this a bit of a dilemma for the UK? If they're expected to dump, as in quote unquote, our relationship with Europe in terms of trade, which is our closest trading partner, in order to get closer to America in terms of trade. I mean, that leaves Keir Starmer in a very difficult position when he's trying to reset our relationship with Europe, doesn't it?
It will become, I think, a dilemma if we want to do a big trade deal with America. Now, we've seen a lot of reverse gears being engaged on this. Lord Mandelson this week was himself saying the era of doing a big free trade deal that's quite comprehensive and covers a lot of things is over, and we need to focus very specifically on sector by sector deals where both sides, Britain and America, are going to get a positive benefit out of it. And it's obvious to Trump that he's getting a positive benefit. That's the key to doing a deal with Trump, is that providing he can see that there's a benefit for America, then he can be persuaded. And the reason I say that is because there was an attempt under post-Brexit, but under Trump, to try and do a big trade deal. And of course, it foundered on the higher standards that Britain expects for agricultural imports, for example, where the hormone-raised beef in America that's not something that Britain currently allows. And of course, if we lock ourselves into EU standards, this is where Stephen Moore comes in. The more we lock ourselves into EU standards, because they ban hormone-raised beef, if we tie ourselves into that, we're never going to be able to do a trade deal that includes agriculture. The same goes for cars. One of Trump's big complaints is that he never sees an American car on the streets of Berlin, but they're everywhere. They're driving up and down Fifth Avenue in New York. German cars, Mercedes and Volkswagens are driving up and down Fifth Avenue. And of course, the reason for that is the difference in regulatory standards. The cars that go to Britain and the EU, because we are very closely aligned with EU standards on that, of course. The cars have a higher safety standards. They've got better protection for pedestrians, and these, they've got to sense pedestrians. They've got better protection for passengers. The structural specifications for building a car are higher in Britain and the EU. And if we're locked into that, we'll never be able to import American cars. And so that's another whole aspect that's off the agenda, and that's what's aggravating to the Americans, and that's why they make Stephen Moore makes a big warning like this. The more you lock yourself into EU regulations, the less we can do with you, the less attractive it is for us.
Yeah, absolutely, David. I want to move on to the other big story that you've got in the paper today about Donald Trump Jr. and that as his father's administration is coming together, that it's Donald Jr. who has been increasingly pulling the strings in sort of rewarding and gathering these quite anti-establishment MAGA faithful into the cabinet. This is obviously, we know that Ivanka Trump had a very large role in Trump's last administration, as did her husband. But Donald Trump Jr. is sort of shaping up as the power behind the throne in this one, isn't he? Does he actually have an official role yet? Or will he have one?
Right, well, that's a good question. And the reason we wanted to write about this is because a certain Elon Musk is getting all the attention because he's inserted himself in Mar-a-Lago and is constantly at Trump's side. But the guy who behind the scenes for many months, if not years, has been preparing for the next Trump cabinet and administration to be strongly MAGA, which is the Make America Great Again movement that the Trumps have started in America. That's Don Jr. And he doesn't seem to want a place inside the West Wing, as Ivanka Trump had her own office and was an advisor to the president. And of course, her husband, he had a role that was not so much formal, but was really far-reaching in the last administration, especially as regards Middle East policy. Absolutely. Well, they're out. They made it pretty clear when Trump relaunched in 2022 his campaign that they weren't taking part, and it's kind of symbolic of a change, I think, on one level that's happened to the direction of Trump and MAGA. That it's the white male core of the movement is really symbolized by Don Jr., who's a famously sort of hunting, fishing, outdoorsy kind of image that he cultivates, as well as the very aggressive attacks, even more so than his father, on not just Democrats, but any Republicans who are seen as rivals. And what he's been doing is sort of making sure that kind of image, he's brought it with him. So, for example, he was very supportive of J.D. Vance, the author who became an Ohio senator during his campaign, and he became very friendly with J.D. Vance. And when Trump was considering his running mate, Trump was leaning towards Doug Burgum, who's this not so well known, certainly not a flashy guy in the limelight, who's a North Dakota governor. But he'd be absolutely perfect for Trump. He's not going to steal any limelight. He's just going to be a very solid, safe pair of hands. But it was Don Jr. who made the argument, who led the push to get J.D. Vance to be the vice president, because he saw in this young guy who's only 40 a future for the MAGA movement, and if you like, a bit of empire building. And this is the Trump brand. They like to build skyscrapers in American cities with a big T on the top, if you've ever been and seen one. And this is almost what the philosophy that Don Jr. persuaded his father was: don't go for this North Dakota governor who's going to do a solid job for you and then disappear. Go for J.D. Vance, who's going to continue the movement. It won't be over when you leave office, and it's going to continue. And in this vein, Donald Trump Jr. then proceeded to try and block all the traditional well-known Republicans from the cabinet who might stand in J.D. Vance's way. So we saw just before all of the cabinet appointments this week, we saw a post from Donald Trump saying, I'm not considering Nikki Haley or Mike Pompeo. Well, on one level, that's because they're not loyal enough to Trump. They're not MAGA, if you like. On another level, this was angled for by Don Jr. because they could stand in the way of his guy, J.D. Vance, in 2028.
Yeah. And David, just briefly, what's the reaction from not just America and political commentators, but also inside the Republican Party to these nominations by Trump, but also, the fact that Don Jr. is the one pushing the levers on that?
Well, all the focus this week has been on a couple of the cabinet nominations who are really left field, and both of whom it turns out have got very controversial personal histories, including allegations of sexual assault, actually. In the case of Matt Gaetz, who's a Florida congressman who's very friendly with Don Jr., and again, his path into Trump world was smoothed by Trump's eldest son. Well, he's been nominated for Attorney General, which is the top legal officer of America. And yet he has an outstanding House ethics inquiry into having sexual relations with an underage girl who's 17, taking illicit drugs. And moreover, he's just widely reviled, actually, by many members of the House for his antics, such as showing them videos of all the girls he slept with and that sort of thing. This has been tumbling out this week. So he's a very controversial, to say the least, and unusual pick by Trump for the countries to enforce all the country's legal system and laws. And we've also got the Fox News presenter Pete Hegseth, who for Defense Secretary, who does have a distinguished military record, but is the highest rank he achieved was Major, and that's not very senior. And he's got no real administrative experience, so that raised eyebrows as well. And of course, we've heard of allegations that there was a complaint by a woman of a sexual assault in 2017 that has been investigated and dismissed by the police. But again, it's not a great look for two of your most prominent cabinet picks.
Definitely not a good look.
So these allegations come tumbling out the moment that you name them.